Recording in progress.
Hi, everyone. Oh, still on? Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Come on in, please. Join us. A sincere thank you to Rob Schwartz, Lead Supervisor for Curriculum and Instruction K through 12 Math. Is that correct? It's a long title. Thank you, Rob, for joining us today for our December roundtable. And in shifting this program to a more cooperative and interactive form of communication, we ask everyone here in the room and those joining us through Zoom to treat Rob and all of our subsequent guests with the utmost respect and appreciation for being here. This meeting, as with all of our roundtable meetings, will occur in the spirit of cooperation, open communication, and mutual respect. In order to enable our participants to equitably ask questions, we ask that when you're called upon to ask a question, you only ask one question at a time. And you can always ask a second question after others have had a turn to ask the first. In addition, we'll be allowing those on Zoom to ask questions throughout the meeting, and their participation will be coordinated by the Vice Presidents of Communications. Before we get started, we'd like to remind you that we have a couple of events coming up, and we'd like to invite you to our next parent education program. On Wednesday, January 7th, a parent ed program featuring a panel of former high school graduates from Lower Merion and from Harriton will be talking about their transition to post-high school life. This will be a great listen for parents and students alike, especially on the high school level. That's always on Zoom. All of our parent ed programs always on Zoom. And a note about our last parent ed program, unfortunately, was not recorded correctly. There was a glitch in the program and only 47 seconds of the program were actually recorded. So we do apologize for that. We know there was interest in watching it and we apologize, but technical difficulties out of our control for that one. Our January roundtable will be held on January 20th, and our guests will be Mo Hussein, LMSD Director of Nutritional Services, and Kendall Stokes, Assistant Director of Nutritional Services. And we're also excited to share an update about the ISC mini grants on December 2nd. Members of the ISC, CSE, and the Educational Foundation of Lower Merion met with 6 LMSD administrators to review 32 mini grant applications for this school year. We selected 18 grants totaling $13,047 and appreciated the board's vote last night to approve the awards. The ISC agreed to fund 2 additional grants contingent upon additional information from applicants and approval from building administrators. Additionally, alternate funding through Lower Merion School District was secured for 10 of the applicants, bringing total number of funded projects to 28, with the 2 pending. The ISC is grateful for the 11 HSAs and for the Educational Foundation and the Committee for Special Education for help to funding this program. We invite you to follow us on Facebook and on Instagram for more details and the latest info about our events. And if you'd like to see any of our past roundtables or parent ed programs, you'll find them on our LMSD ISC YouTube page. Our meeting today will be closed captioned, recorded, and posted to the ISC YouTube channel. Now let's give a warm welcome to Mr. Rob Schwartz. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came to be a math educator, and how your path eventually led you here to our district.
Sure. So again, thank you all for having me. Thank you all for coming in this morning. I'm Rob Schwartz. I am a grad of Lower Merion High School. I graduated from here in '96, but I spent the last 23 years serving the Upper Darby School District, 12 of which as an elementary teacher, most of that time in first grade, and then about 10 or 11 years serving in a similar role as the math supervisor there. I loved every minute in Upper Darby. We had amazing students and amazing families really dealing with some really challenging circumstances. And I was honored to, to serve and to support that community for, for as long as I did. But when this position opened up here, I was just excited for the chance to come home. And, that's really what it felt like. I, walk through the halls and there, I get really weird glimpses of like, I think I know this hallway. None of the teachers that I had are here, but there are teachers who know the teachers that I had. And it just feels really nice to be home. So, I appreciate, Scott and Dr. Anelli giving me a chance to come.
What is your vision for the math curriculum in our district, and what specific goals do you hope to achieve here?
Sure. My focus on math is really guided by my belief that math is for everyone. I've always, as a child, I was someone who was very successful in math, did very well, won the games of around the world, and it really made me think that, that I was special. I was really good at math, and it really wasn't until I became a teacher, especially a community like Upper Darby, where I recognize that not everyone feels that way. When I tell people what I do, and I hated math when I was in school, or I'm not a math person, or I don't like numbers, and it's become kind of my personal mission to kind of dispel that. So really, my guiding vision is math is for everyone. That everyone feels that they can do math, be successful in upper level mathematics, have a positive attitude towards mathematics, and so really that's that's my tentpole. And really my goal here is to make sure that there are systems of support, acceleration, remediation, intervention, so that all students feel that way and see themselves as, a mathematician, as a math person. And honestly, like outside of the, the data side, like I'll know when that's, when that goal is met, when some of the student groups that, and some of the students who don't feel that way, when the numbers reflect that they do.
Can you describe your approach to developing or revising the math curriculum, and what key factors do you consider?
Sure. Everything that I do, whether that's revising curriculum, hiring staff, working with teachers, is really guided by, is this right for students? The students are always at the center of every decision that I make. And that's hard when you're working in an organization of, 800 to 1,000 adults, where schedules dictate things and finances can dictate things. But I really try to center every decision that I make on, is this right for students? And then as far as, revising, developing, selecting curriculum, is this right for every student? Is this right for our special education population? Is it right for our emerging EL population? And I feel like when I center the kids, the other decisions, kind of fall into place.
What are the strengths of the LMSD math programs at the different building levels, and where can these programs be improved?
Sure. I'm still evaluating, things. I'm 3 months in. I started mid-August. But I would say what's been, what I've noticed as the biggest strength is that we have amazing staff. We have, wonderful resources and access to resources. We have a community of families who value education, and you can see that in their, in their children. So I think that's the greatest strength. We're starting from a really great spot. As far as, what needs to be improved, I think there are systems and structures that, really need to be revised. And I'm sorry, I'm just looking at, some of the notes that I have on questions. And when I say, systems that need to be, revised and changed, it's really about trusting that buildings are and teachers are making the right decisions, but then really verifying that the things that I think are happening or supposed to be happening are actually happening. So really that becomes my role, is really trusting and verifying that, that these systems are in place.
Have you seen, can I just ask
Please.
a follow-up on that?
Yeah,
Have you seen anything that's jumped out to you in that arena, or you're still in evaluation?
Yes, there are things about how interventions and supports are provided, how students are selected, how they exit, that, we're blessed with the fact that, in terms of students that are struggling, it is a smaller number than in a place like Upper Darby. And so, sometimes things are kind of shoehorned in on where they fit and where, because we're talking about individual students. But really some of those systems need to be in place. And again, the verifying of that, I think, is a really key component. That
Yeah,
answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
it does. Thank you.
And how do you plan to support teachers in their professional development?
Sure. Yeah, I believe strongly that, it's not a program or a curriculum that is going to, make the difference. It's the teachers who are doing it. I've seen really amazing teachers elevate, inadequate resources. And I've seen teachers, over years of experience, I'm not saying here, I've seen teachers who have great resources and options, but aren't able to leverage them effectively. I don't love program implementation trainings when I lead professional development. I believe deeply in instructional pedagogy. So giving teachers, the content knowledge, the teacher moves, the strategies that they need to be effective, that will help them take whatever resources that they have and elevate them. You know, I told, Scott and Dr. Rinaldi when I started, do not expect me to be, in my office at the Dow, most days. I've been here more than I would have liked so far. But I tend to be in buildings and in classrooms. I believe in, on the spot PD. Like I don't like to jump in and say, oh, remember this one time where this one thing happened, 2 weeks later. They'll see me in classrooms modeling lessons. We have an elementary pilot going on using a program that I used, back in Upper Darby. I modeled 15 or 20 lessons, in individual classrooms, kind of, leading the way from the front. So really, it's the instructional practices that I think are going to make a difference for our kids.
Great. How is AI used effectively in relation to math?
Sure. It's funny, math was always kind of, at the forefront of AI, thinking of if you have any older kids, when photo math kind of first hit the scene and, the teachers kind of freaked out, oh my God, they're photo mathing everything. So, math and math ed has kind of been on the forefront of AI for a very long time. So it's a world I'm very comfortable with. We're blessed in this district with 3 really wonderful tech coordinators, that their official tech supervisors, what is their official title? Tech coaches, who have been working with staff, administration, and students, making sure that they're kind of on the cutting edge of what exists. I think, the simplest piece, the smallest piece is really it helps streamline, some kind of non-instructional tasks for our teachers to kind of give them bigger bandwidth to focus on kids. I think, we've been working with our staff on providing kind of unique experiences with AI, knowing that we're preparing them for jobs that probably don't exist yet. So there's a lot of really great opportunities to leverage the speed at which technology is changing in AI to, to move kids forward. I know the next question is kind of the dangers of AI. I will tell you, upfront, I'm very, very skeptical of the role of chatbot tutors in math instruction. I believe that learning is a social endeavor. I think kids come to school for 2 reasons. That is to figure out who they are as a learner, and to figure out how they, what they're learning, how does it matter to them? How do they connect with it? How does it relate to, to their knowledge? How does it relate to the other students? How does it connect them to other people? So while I think that there is great value in, AI chatbot tuners in terms of, some equity pieces, I think it is a great replacement for non-instruction, for when teachers, that aren't there. I do not believe that it will ever replace good instruction and good, classroom community. One of the great things about Amplify, which is the 5th through 8th grade program that we have, that is a tech-heavy program, but Amplify believes deeply that, we're using tech to build community and is really careful not to have kids isolated on a computer. But I think that, some of the claims of, technologists, I don't know, it's a better term than that, in terms of like having every kid have an individualized tutor and that's going to be their teacher, I think misses what education really is.
Can you describe some of the pathways to acceleration at LMSD? I feel like
That's come up a lot since
I was going to say, I think you've probably heard about it, and I feel like I've heard about it since the time I walked into the district too.
Sure.
So,
So the pathways to acceleration begin in fourth grade or at the end of fourth grade, where at the end of fourth grade, students need to prove proficiency on fifth grade skills and standards before accelerating through fifth grade content and getting into sixth grade math. But that, it's a game of, I don't say chutes and ladders, it's really just a game of ladders, that there are acceleration options all the way through from fourth grade through 12th grade. Because students continue to have an option to take advanced courses, to accelerate through pre-calc and get to calc if they're, if they want to make sure that they have that on their transcript. So the acceleration options exist at every grade level. But really the first ladder is, at the end of fourth grade, outside of District Policy 215, which handles unique cases, outside of our traditional pathways. Hey, man.
Welcome.
How are you?
How are you?
Good. One of our great teachers here.
How do you know that your student is ready for acceleration at any grade band?
It's a really, really difficult question to answer. And I think that's one that's typically misunderstood. I think that schools, not specifically Lower Merion or Upper Darby, but I think like the K-12 environment nationally in terms of math, has not really figured out how to enrich, that schools really only know how to accelerate. So it's a really big challenge to figure out, are they ready to enrich and deepen, their knowledge of grade level standards by doing more, deeper depth of knowledge, levels 3 and level 4 questions, to synthesizing and analyzing and constructing, versus moving through to the next grade level content. I don't know if there's really a great answer to that question. We try to take as much data and make, informed decisions, both in terms of how are they doing in their curricular assessments. We're trying to, to bring in and use more diagnostic data to tell us, where students exist outside of our curricular, examinations. We try to give, proficiency tests at future grade levels, but really trying to figure out that line between, does this student need to be accelerated or do they need to be enriched? I think is still something that schools struggle with.
And kind of on that pathway, off the question here is
Sure.
that I think part of the angst some families have about acceleration, that if you don't accelerate, you will never get to calculus in high school, and that will not be on your transcript. And there are programs and universities that are looking for that particular class to
Sure.
be on the student's transcript.
Sure.
So how do you kind of marry the idea of students, if they want to go into certain careers, need that, but they
Sure.
may not be ready for acceleration at all or until very late in the game?
So it's a two-part answer, I guess, in my head, is all of our acceleration pathways, will get students to calculus if they believe that that is a need for them. If you move through and you take, you catch the first train at the end of fourth grade, you potentially would hit, calculus or AP calculus by, your junior year. If you catch it at any other spot, if you move from sixth grade into 7B8, if you move from integrated 3 and you accelerate through pre-calc, you have the option to get there by your senior year. I think what's really understood is when you're making that decision to accelerate, the challenges that go with that. That if it was, as simple as, accelerating through, and, jumping through, accelerating through pre-calc and taking it over the summer, showing proficiency on, fifth grade standards and fourth grade, but, potentially there's a depth of that you need, that you have an option. We want to make sure that kids have the option to get there. But I think we have to understand that, some of the challenges that potentially go with, accelerating through content. I will say at the same regard, and I've talked to the staff a little bit about this. The staff's job and our job is to make recommendations for the courses that students should take. We have experience dealing with, similar students that you've had before. We've been, teachers have been doing this for a long time, but ultimately that's a recommendation. That our recommendations of, course placements at the middle school and the high school level, I guess the high school levels when they do kind of course placements for honors or, or CP. Is a student and a family's decision to make. We're giving our best recommendation. But your child, their individual goals. And those are decisions that I think students and families should be making.
Can you talk more about the summer bridge program that you just referenced?
Sure.
In case there's questions about that?
Sure, especially so, and there was a change a bit to it that went through the board last April. Historically, the summer bridge program existed, meaning if you are a student in, I'll use fourth grade as an example, but the summer bridge program exists in other areas as well. If you are a student in fourth grade that did exceptionally well in fourth grade, then we gave you, what we've called our summer bridge program, where you would participate in summer work, moderated or, guided by, a district teacher. And if you participated in the summer bridge program, then you would move to, accelerate through and move to, Math 6, now known as 6-7A. The slight change to it is now just participating in a summer bridge program is not the same as showing proficiency in. So at the end of fourth grade, students who do exceptionally well in fourth grade have an option to take an acceleration test that would test fifth grade standards. If they do well, if they show proficiency, we would move them to Math 6 or 6-7A. If they don't do well, then they can participate in the school district's summer bridge program. They can study. Some of them are blessed to have math supervisor as their parents who can help them get through it. They have an option to kind of test in again. They don't have to necessarily participate in the summer bridge, but we want to make sure that everyone has an option for support. But we're asking that students show proficiency in, as opposed to just participate in.
So at the end of the summer bridge program, they would have to be tested?
Yes.
Be retested. Okay. And so if at that point, the results of the test would dictate whether or not they could advance.
Correct.
Okay.
And it works differently in each grade. So in fourth grade, there's an assessment test to move into 6-7A. At the end of fifth grade, there is not a summer bridge test. Those students are just based on their curricular measures moved into 6 or 6-7A. Sixth graders, I can go through each one of them.
Is it helpful? Do you guys want to? Okay.
Okay,
yes.
sure. Sixth grade students, they will have to prove proficiency in an assessment to move into either Math 7 or prove proficiency in 7A, the first part of seventh grade, to move into 7B8. Students in Math 7, any student in seventh grade math can take the virtual eighth grade math course through MVP, which is the online program through the MCIU. Those students do not have to test. That is a standalone course. So passing that course would allow them to move into integrated 1 in eighth grade. And then all students have to go through all the integrated courses. They're core fundamental courses. They're tied to, integrated 2 is tied to the Keystone exam. But we do want to make sure that students who haven't proven or shown, the ability to accelerate at the middle school level doesn't mean that they won't show that level as they, master that content and, and even begin to take their school more seriously as they approach and really start to think about college. That after integrated 3, we give students the option to accelerate through pre-calculus and move into AP Calc so that they can hit Calc their senior year.
And accelerating through pre-calc would really mean taking a summer
Yes.
calculus class or pre-calc class, and there's no real option because there's no test that you can test out of pre-calc.
Correct.
Okay.
I learned a lot in 3 months. Okay, I got
How are the pathways for students with IEPs or 504 plans the same and or different from their non-disabled peers?
I would say, very specifically, they shouldn't be. The whole purpose of students who have, an individual, education plan is to make the course content accessible to them. That puts it, these are the specifically, designed instructional plan, whether that's preferential seatment, learning math, instructional support lab, however many, periods or, support they're getting. But the whole goal of an IEP is to make grade level content accessible to them. And if it's not being accessible to them, me going kind of probably off script. Scott, cover your ears. No, I'm kidding. But then the IEP should potentially be changed because the goal is like, the plan should be, how do we make that accessible to them? When we talk about differentiation, which is really, a formalized, IEP is kind of a formalized version of differentiation. You can differentiate content, you can differentiate instruction, and you can differentiate assessment. But all those pieces should be, focused on helping make grade level content accessible.
What changes are being proposed at the state level in the realm of math?
Sure. The biggest change, that we're seeing, and I know the district kind of started to move in that direction last year, is, the online PSA and Keystone exam. Starting this year, all school districts across the Commonwealth have to give the test online. It is a change. It is a little bit different. Schools that have done it have not seen a drastic dip, in math scores by taking it online. I know there's, push to kind of take it, paper and pencil. But it is the first year they take it online. The test still looks like kind of 2004 internet. And it's not real pretty to look at. But we already started working with our staff. I met with the middle school and high school staff in November. Carl, when was that? November? No, we had that in October. Yeah, November, right? When we were at the Hiring Lever. Yeah. To really talk about, the key changes to taking it online, what the types of question looks like, what are the tools embedded. What's really nice is the embedded calculator in the online assessment is the Desmos calculator that they use at the middle school Amplify program. It is in my opinion, it's kind of a superior tool to both the TI-84 and the TI-30 XS that we use, as the handheld one. But that's really the big, real change. There is, for the first time, I'm getting inklings of a movement to rewrite and readjust the math standards. They haven't been rewritten since PA Core came into effect in 2014. Starting to hear whispers that, in the next couple of years, they may rewrite the math standards a little bit. But that is really in its infancy. I am part of a group we've been meeting for years of about 30 or so school districts, math supervisors. We meet 3 or 4 times a year and I'll talk pretty regularly. Kevin Morrow, who is the state coordinator for PDE, Megan Clementi, who is the kind of leader of the math side of the PSSA. She regularly comes to the meeting, so we're in contact pretty regularly to kind of keep all of ourselves informed on what we're doing in each district.
Is there apprehension about moving those tests to online, considering the historical issues with taking AP exams online when the kids weren't able to get on, PSATs, SATs stopping halfway through?
So I think, following COVID, when most of the things went online and most school districts went really comfortable going, one-to-one with technology, there hasn't been an issue. I know there are school districts that 3 or 4 years ago went online and then backed off, and now they're back online. But one of the school districts, I won't say their name outside, I know the reason they went back is they were not one-to-one at the time. They were a bring your own device, which made it really challenging for them to deliver. Upper Darby has been doing it online for I don't work there anymore. 12,000 students have been taking it online. We didn't have an issue. I know here is about most of our buildings were taking it online. Didn't see a huge issue. I heard good things about coming out of the Keystone exam last week. So I don't necessarily see it being much of an issue in terms of devices. There's typically a concern with scores dropping because they don't have paper and pencil, and maybe their students aren't as willing to write. But that becomes inherent upon our teachers and, and my role in supporting them to make sure that students are used to and comfortable using the platform.
So what do you consider the biggest challenges facing math education today, and how do you plan to address them?
Sure. I think you hinted at it earlier when you talked about colleges still expecting, or many colleges still expecting, kind of calculus on, on a transcript. There's a very significant misalignment between K-12 education and higher ed. That race to calculus is right at the forefront of that debate. Yeah.
That's interesting. Why?
Whoever said that agrees with that. Yeah. There is, the race to calculus has been obviously a really big conversation at the K-12 level for years. Are we doing students a disservice by forcing them to calculus, and every student needs to take calculus when we want to get them to understand math deeply, be able to apply it when they need to, and not just be able to produce, which oftentimes means that we need to spend a longer time digging into content. That race to calculus that's existed since the 60s and 70s happened well before changes to standards that came into play with Common Core, where they really shifted the goal from how to do and procedures and getting correct answers to understanding why that answer is correct, how to apply it, what it looks like visually. But because that idea of calculus has always existed, higher ed has been slow to change. When I've talked to college admissions officers, they will tell me that they agree that we shouldn't be racing kids, that they're seeing kids, come to university. More and more students are needing kind of a remedial non-credit bearing class when they get there. But the transcript game is the transcript game. I don't think that there's an easy or a quick answer to fix that, as long as the conversation needs to continue. You may have kind of followed, kind of the fight between, the University of California's, math entrance. They work with Dr. Joe Bowler and potentially were, removing some, from math needs and making data science more of a thing. It's an ongoing battle.
And lastly, is there anything that you wish we would have asked you about today? This is your opportunity to answer a question that was unasked.
No, I don't think so. The big piece for me is, really that guiding temple that math is for everyone. Serving, a community like Upper Darby where, our proficiency rates are very different than, in a community like this. I spent, many, many years making sure that supports and interventions are in place for all learners, helping students see themselves as a mathematician, helping students believe that, that math is something that everyone can do to a high level. And I'm really, really excited to kind of bring that sort of energy, to this community, because I think that there are still students, both successful and not successful, who may not necessarily see themselves as a math person or as a numbers person, and have positive associations with mathematics that I think will be valuable, whether you go into a STEM career or not. Right? I don't believe that you need for your life how to solve a system of linear inequalities, but the making sense of problems and persevering and following, using inductive and deductive reasoning. Those are things that are universal, and I think that they're missed when students are just performing math without having a joy for it.
You actually do have one more.
Yeah. Right. That's why we're looking at each other. We knew it. So I know kids can move between honors and CP classes at the high school level.
Sure.
But is the material covered differently in the classes? And would this make it difficult to go from CP to honors? I'm assuming it's easier to go to honors, back down to CP, but in specific that way.
It shouldn't be.
Okay.
Right. Whether it is or isn't in practice is, an answer that still needs to be ironed out and looked at.
Mm-hmm.
But it shouldn't be. My belief is that if a student's slated to take integrated math 3, that they should make the decision of whether honors or CP is the right option for them. And that if you're, choosing to take honors, even though that you had historically taken CP and, done okay, but if you're making the decision like, hey man, I really want to challenge myself and push myself forward, then you should be able to have access to that class and be successful in that class. There shouldn't necessarily be a significant change in content that, honor students are covering, this much content and this much, CP is covering this much content. It should potentially be, the depth and the level of independence that goes into that work. But it should not be it should not be an impossible task. It should not be that there's missing content if you're moving from a CP level to another level.
Okay.
You look like you have questions then.
We all, I know we're gonna
So
question.
many, but I know that there's probably all of the factors like.
Okay, so
Okay.
we're going to open it up to questions at this point.
Please.
Molly, if you want to take the first.
I don't know which one is the most important. Oh, okay. So this was given to us, I guess, at the last year's ISC meeting when we met previous. It wasn't you last year, was it?
No.
That's okay. That's what I thought. So on this, it, gives you the map, the track from, for the accelerated, bridge.
Yeah.
You want to give it to me and I'll.
Oh, well, I.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Okay.
Reference my question. So,
Okay.
I mean, I think I have another one.
No, it's fine. I'm
That's okay.
I'm
If
sure
you-
you're very
Just
familiar
want to know
with
if
that
you wanted
one.
to have it in front of you.
No, I
Okay,
have
you got it.
Yeah.
I have it.
Oh,
Oh,
no,
he's got it in his head.
Okay, so is this different? Because when you were explaining the bridge program, you said there is no summer bridge after, so when the kids are in fourth grade, they can do the summer bridge, for fifth grade.
Hmm.
But then there's no summer bridge program available, but on this it says.
There is after sixth grade.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, did I-
Yeah, okay.
And let me be really clear about the summer bridge. And really one of the big differences is the summer bridge and participating in the district sponsored and district run summer bridge is not a requirement,
Yeah.
but
no.
it is an option for students who want to take advantage, because we don't want students who, again, to have an advantage of, their dad is a math supervisor, and someone isn't. So we want to have an option for them to take a summer bridge, but it's
Okay,
after
so
fourth and sixth.
for fifth grade, because there used to be an option after fifth grade that they could take. So you're saying it's not that anymore?
Correct. The fifth grade students in Math 5 are split based on, a rubric, the rubric that's included in that. I can send you the rubric. There's a rubric for students in Math 5 that they are split depending on their curricular, work in this rubric. They're split into either going into Math 6 or they're accelerated into 6, 7A, where they would then take 7B, 8 the following year. We compact 3 grades into 2 years. So they don't need to bridge, and kind of skip over a class at fifth grade.
Is there an updated form like that updated?
It's included in there, isn't it? On that map.
No, it's totally different than.
What
this
does it say after?
It's-
I'm sorry, maybe
That's why I
I'm,
was like, I don't know if you
Yeah,
know
it's
which one
different.
she's talking
unless I'm
about.
looking at a different.
This prep thing that you just said, the CP, that's not on there either.
Well,
Yeah, this is an old, this
High
is an
school
old,
thing,
no,
that's
this
not-
is an old map.
Yeah,
This
that
is
was
an
from
old map.
last year.
So can you advise us where people can find the
Sure.
new map?
We'll bring it up really quick, Beth. So it was included in the April CCOB meeting. Is that when I guess you would have presented it? And it was
Under board
included,
docs.
and it was included in the letter that I sent home to all fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh grade parents in October. But there is a new,
Yeah, I did not get that.
and I believe it's on the district website as well.
I didn't get that.
If your students were in fourth grade, Math 5, Math 6, or Math 7,
Yeah.
you
yeah,
should have gotten an email.
I didn't.
Okay.
That's not against you, though.
Sure.
Yeah, you sound like, your wealth of knowledge.
Some days,
And
about something.
and then my other question, and I'll make it quick, because I don't want to take up other people's time.
Molly. Go
Go ahead.
go
I just wanted to get
ahead.
it. The amplifying tech-based learning thing that they're doing for fifth and eighth grade, do you think that that is more helpful for the kids in fifth or eighth grade rather than doing books and writing out math problems? They're doing their homework on the computer,
So I really like the Amplify program. I believe in their mission about integrating technology and building community. The fact is textbooks, because of the way the standards are built, right? Textbooks don't decide on the standards and they don't decide on the content. So kind of the traditional, do 1 to 37 odd, on page 6, page 64 doesn't exist in math textbooks anymore, that they all really are built for, a really, deep version of procedural fluency, conceptual understanding and application. Now there is a continuum kind of in terms of where things fit into kind of a more traditional 1 to 36 odd. You don't see a lot of textbooks on that side. And then there is a more kind of constructivist side, which is probably where, amplify and, investigation at the elementary level kind of sits. There's other problems with investigations, which is kind of why we're, potentially we're phasing that out. But I believe in the approach that Amplify uses, but I think what it speaks to is it's not the program that's going to make a difference. It's the, it's the instruction. So I think how you use the Amplify resources really is going to drive whether that program, is effective or not.
Thank you.
Talia.
Hi, so not to get too personal and pointed in my question, but so I had a fourth grader and he did not qualify for accelerated math. He was not given the opportunity to take the bridge based off of teacher recommendation. He didn't qualify because he had an emergency craniotomy at the end of the year and his brain was still. The year prior, he, based on his grades up into the craniotomy, he should have been at least allowed the bridge program. Teacher recommendation kept him from being allowed to do that. Now he's in 5th grade math, bored out of his mind, and is possibly going to be able to be accelerated to 6A.
6-7A. Yep.
7A. But really should probably be with the 7B8, and now he's not going to have that bridge to be able to get to that further acceleration. So my question is kind of a two-parter. Our teacher recommendations going back in, because I believe he said that they were where last year Dr. Lilly had finally said he was getting rid of teacher recommendation. And when is he going to have the opportunity to finally be in a challenging math, like in that accelerated math program where he probably should be at this?
Sure. So a couple questions. So number one, teacher recommendation is removed from the rubric. It is not included.
All right.
Now there are always individual cases that come up, but the teacher recommendation on, subjective measures no longer exist in the rubric. Now, as far as when can your, son, sorry.
Yeah.
When can your son potentially move up and, I don't say catch, but move up to the, to the level with the students who got settled on? For individual cases, the school district still has, policy 215 that you may want to look at that governs individual case acceleration that exists, before students hit integrated one. So that might be something that you want to, explore. I'm sorry, there's another piece to your question. Oh, when will he be challenged because he feels bored?
Yeah, like
It's a no, this is important. It's a really interesting and important conversation that comes up. And I know it from my own son. We're in a neighboring school district where, he made, distinguished honor roll and, grade, he made 280 of the 310 kids in his grade made distinguished honor roll. I will tell you that, the goal of K-8 mathematics is to help them understand and apply the mathematics and really understand it in a very, very deep way. And I think what I'm hearing from people is, the surprising nature of how things really ramp up when they get to the high school level, when they're asked to, there is no new math to learn, there's only math to apply. So do I believe that your child should or shouldn't be in the class? I don't know your son, nor do I know his data, but I think you should kind of explore that. But I think to some degree, enriching at grade level or near grade level or just accelerated, it is oftentimes a better fit than rushing through, content.
yeah, I mean, I do get that. My son, for the example of my son is he's starting to lose the love of math. And, he's a fourth grader that's like, I want to be an engineer. I want to work I want to do the summer bridge. I want to do this work, and now he's losing that, he's like, I don't, I just forget it. Math is boring. Maybe I'm going to do something else now. Like he's losing it because
He's not in that,
yes.
in that piece. And I think that that's fair. I will say to some degree, this is an unfair thing. Carl, cover your ears, this one. I think that in general, like there is a belief that when math is easy, it becomes boring. And I think that's the case. I think there's an instructional side in, enriching and exploring math is, there's nothing about, I think when you come to, reading or humanities classes, when they're asked to have opinions, to construct, you can have strong opinions about math, and about math content that should make even content that you can calculate fast and find the percentage of a number, that you can still do things to make math interesting and important. And I think the boring piece is, I don't want to always equate easy with boring. But again, for your son, you may want to explore,
Yeah.
program 215C, because I think you are right, though. And I should be clear, especially if you look at this, the actual, like the current pathway that exists. I think you were looking, I apologize, you were looking at an older document.
We've added it to the chat at this
Mhm.
point, and Molly actually just sent it to your Gmail too. The current path.
Oh, yeah, I found it.
Okay, it's in your
a
email
lot
too.
less
And it's on the
complex
chat
than
for
this.
anyone who's not online. We can
Beneficial
make
to
sure
you.
you get it out
But
as well.
But I understand there is a
We can post it on
self-esteem and identity piece
our
that goes along with like,
Instagram and Facebook pages.
oh, maybe I'm not as good because these kids got accelerated and I didn't.
Yeah.
It is a part about the acceleration math that I don't like generally.
Thank you.
Okay, we do have a question online.
Sure.
Yeah, Nate, do you want to raise your, or unmute
Yes.
yourself?
Can you guys
Should be
hear
able
me?
to come through on here.
Can you hear me?
Oh,
You're
you're still
muted.
muted. Hold on one second. Go ahead, sorry, can you start again?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
now we can, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so we have a group of parents. All our kids are in advanced math, so it's like one grade accelerated from acceleration. Across the school district, there are probably 10 of those. Our biggest ask is, can we have some clarity when they get to 8th grade? How are they going to take IM3? And what's the projection? What kind of courses they're going to have in high school? Because we only hear anecdotally from once or twice from other kids what happened before, but we have no idea, and we don't want to go there unprepared. So yeah, that's our ask pretty much.
For the unique population who, I don't say took advantage, who got accelerated before the acceleration ramp hits, and like I said, it is a handful of students. I can't tell you specifically how IM3 in 8th grade would be delivered. That is kind of a changing question based on resources and staffing. There have been times students have been bused to the high school and then bused back. We have students that are taking online class via Zoom with the teacher. So there's not a one way that we'll definitely saying this is how IM3 would be delivered to an 8th grader.
Okay.
As far as pathway moving forward, the traditional pathway, if they continue to move at that speed and that rate, following integrated 3 is pre-calculus. Following pre-calculus would be calculus at, the CP, calculus AB, APAB or APBC. And then we do have classes, either concurrently or beyond that, whether there's AP statistics, but we also have a math seminar course for students who have completed AP calculus. And then,
Right.
how is it linear? Is it linear?
Okay.
And, that's to say nothing of, the options for, potentially dual enrollment options through local universities.
So for sorry, it's probably common knowledge for others. For dual enrollment, it's our as parents' responsibility to handle the enrollment at universities.
I think that's an ever-changing relationship.
Okay.
So, if that's a couple years down the road, I don't want to say something that 24 hours or 72 hours or 3 months down the road, potentially changes. But there are options for students who take AP calculus or calculus at any level, before their senior year. AP statistics being a great option, linear or math seminar being great options as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have another
We
one on
actually
the,
have two more.
okay.
So Susan, do you want to unmute yourself?
Hi,
Hi there. How are you?
good. How are you? Thank you so much for having this informative meeting. I have a question. My son's in 3rd grade, but he takes 4th grade math. Will he be just eligible for the accelerated assessment in the spring? Because he's not a 4th grade student, but he's a 3rd grade student.
He's a current third grade student taking fourth grade math.
Yes.
Yeah. This is one of those where I sometimes need a little more time to process to know exactly, but I'll give it, yeah. My gut tells me that he would be participating in the same, options that the current students in fourth grade math are taking, which would mean the acceleration test and and those pieces as well.
Okay, because we're not on like the email for fourth grade. We don't get the information like for this. Like if it goes out to fourth grade students, we don't get it because he's third grade student.
And again, this is me kind of having to backtrack and see, how that's the case because it depends on how they're scheduled. So the email that went out to fourth grade parents were students that were listed as, grade 4 math, but it might be like an internal scheduling thing where it's not on his actual ROT. I'll have to do a little homework.
Okay.
Did she send an email to you?
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Susan, can you send an email directly to Rob and then he can point you in the right direction for that?
Sure. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Becca, you want to go?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I'm curious. I know that in the past, before you, so it's understandable if you don't know this history, that there was a point when we tried to get all students done with integrated math 2, or the equivalent rather, by the end of 8th grade, so that they would have more options in high school. And then we went away from that, was my understanding from talking with the previous math person. I'm curious whether or not there's any consideration of, because of exactly the reasons you were saying, where it creates this consciousness of, oh, I must not be as good at math as my peers that are put into these accelerated summer bridge programs, et cetera, having the default path be, we're trying to have everyone to that stage of completing integrated math 2 by the end of 8th grade. Rather than that only being the accelerated path. Is that something that would ever be revisited in the future, or is that just completely off the table?
So I want to be clear that I would be shocked if there was ever a plan that all students would take integrated 2 by the end of 8th grade. And
It might have been integrated 1. Again, my memory is not perfect on this. I don't have detailed notes, but what I remember, and Robin, I think you were there for the conversation, so you might be able to more accurately tell me what it is that I'm remembering. That the previous math person had said, at one point we used to accelerate more people or to treat that as the default for everybody, then we stopped. And I'm just curious about that and the current perspective.
Well, there was a national movement afoot probably, what are we now, 20, I'd say 8 to 10 years ago, of algebra for all, was typically, which to us would have been, and you mentioned that it was before we were doing integrated, right? So it was integrated 1.
It was 13 years ago.
15 years ago?
15.
13?
Algebra for all?
Yeah.
Well, April graduated 22. And per class, everyone hit pre-calc by junior year.
So the point being, so there's a national movement of algebra for all in 8th grade, so that all students could potentially have an option to take calculus their senior year. That movement kind of fell apart very, very quickly, because it took a misunderstanding of, Common Core or PA Core standard. And so it used to be historically that before PA Core hit in 2014, 2015, the middle school standards were very, very, very sparse. And so that's when algebra, went down to the middle schools because the middle school standards were very, very sparse. And there was this push for algebra 1 for all because of, kind of the transcript game. Once people fully understood the new standards that were put in place, and really deepened the middle school standards in terms of not just content, but in terms of application and depth of knowledge, that understanding of algebra for 1 kind of fell away. The problem being that once you had this can of worms open that, algebra 1 and algebra 2 or math 1 or math 2 were in a middle school, it was hard to really kind of pull that back. But that idea of 8th grade algebra for all fell apart when we really understood how deep the standards required them to be. And there, it was great in practice. I'm sorry, it was great in theory, but what was happening, the longitudinal piece of where students were when they got to 11th and 12th grade wasn't a great fit.
Thanks, Becca. Are there any other questions in the room?
Go ahead, no, you haven't asked one yet.
In a way, I'm piggybacking off of her question, and my question is that we had talked about in the beginning about the importance of kids feeling, that confidence about math and feeling good about it. And I wanted some clarity around the concept of there aren't exceptions in relation to what parents would prefer. So a child who's sort of on the bubble for any reason can't talk to anyone about it and say, hey, I was a point off. And I think given my circumstance or given my child's background or given anything, any reason, can we talk about it? And can that parent have that kind of input, especially with a child, with circumstances that might be extenuating or different or just a bubble kind of situation? I'm just curious if parents can have any input.
I am by no means always right nor always perfect. So for me, I'm open to have any sort of conversation. I really want parents to reach out when there's letters. I know some of you said you didn't get them. I got hundreds of emails and interacted with, tons of parents. I'm always willing to have the discussion.
I had a fourth grader. I had two kids that went through. One, it was very obvious, and one borderline was a girl, and she was so pumped about math. And I wrote a note asking, she was a boy, and I wrote a note saying, no, this is, what it is. And so she's also kind of bored this year. And I would have loved to have had that opportunity.
Sure.
So I was just curious.
I'm always willing to have,
opportunity.
I'm willing to always have the conversation.
What would be the path? Should parents reach out to the teacher, principal? What's that process for parents who might?
You want to answer that better than me, because I'll tell them to just email me directly, and I know that's probably not the best answer.
I mean, just broader, take everybody's personal story out of it, from a system standpoint, if everyone reached out to Rob, you have 11 schools, so it's teacher, administrator in the building, and then they often would guide you, or if you don't like what you would hear, that would be the next pathway.
I do want to, sorry, can I?
Yes, please.
The ladder or the acceleration that exists after fourth grade, though, I want to be really clear, is a very, very, very steep ladder for kids that, that if you take, the acceleration pathway after fifth grade, after sixth grade, after seventh grade, you're still, your progression still guides you towards an option for AP Calc your senior year, which is historically kind of the pinnacle to it. Just to be clear though, because everyone's wants their kid to be accelerated and wants their kid to be successful. And that fourth grade is the first option to do that. So people have been sitting for years and years kind of waiting for that option. And I get that. But I just want to be really clear with what that means, which is, if you have a student in fourth grade, that hops on that acceleration after fourth grade, they would be essentially accelerating through and not given instruction on fifth grade math, and then be given a year and a half's worth of math each year in fifth and sixth grade. It is a monster. And I would, historically kind of looking at that, the students who stay on that track over the last few years, and I've done that work, is less than half of the kids who catch that train at the end of fourth grade continue in that progression towards AP Calc their junior year.
Can I comment on the ladder?
Yeah.
My question is, when this situation arises at the very end of the school year, and then you can no longer get a hold of anybody, where do you go from there?
That would be how you would circumvent that ladder. Just
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
that's what happened to me. Spoke with the teacher, didn't get a good answer. Spoke with the principal, didn't get a great answer, and then everybody's gone.
The admin building is open also.
Yeah.
Again, Scott will tell you to go through the right channels. I'm ready to answer all questions.
Okay, I think so. We have some on.
We have another question online.
Now.
I have a lot of historical perspective and being in a lot of roles, including an elementary principal. We separated fourth grade, the fifth grade. That's a really taking everybody's personal situation. I'm going to speak more system wide, to trying to run a system with 8,500 students and make the right decisions. Like when Rob referenced that algebra for all failed. It failed because not everybody was ready to do that. And we don't want to do that. Robin, you asked earlier, we accelerate, could you de-accelerate? Well, sure you can, but you know the emotion that comes with de-acceleration and what that does to a student that leaves their peers. So we don't want to do that. And in a community like this, or in any community, but when you separate kids, it's the only time we do it. It's 4th to 5th grade math. And we do it because we can sit next to each other in a language arts class and have the same content and do it very differently. You might win a Pulitzer Prize and a very average writer, right? And that works in that class. In math, it's different content. So that's the reason we and many other districts accelerate. And so that's a really it's an emotional thing. It's the first time you're separating and you're looking at your neighbors. Is your kid going? And there's an anxiousness that makes sense. There's also a reason to do it that makes sense. And balancing that has been challenging. And it's something we will always work at because everybody has their individual circumstances that changes that. And some of them warrant reconsideration, right? And then it doesn't work in the system. And what the goal is accelerate, or is it? Because being a high school principal, I learned that we accelerated a lot of kids too early. And then now I hate math. And I feel awful for our teachers that teach integrated 3 honors who aren't loved because they're the symbol of why their kid doesn't love math. And that's not really the cause. And so as a system, we have this tough situation of doing right by people because sometimes nameless parent is like, go, send my kid with everyone because that's what you feel is right. And then it sometimes catches you at a time where it's like, wow, I didn't really want to sign up for this. And you don't learn till a lot later. So that foundational math is why NCTM, National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, didn't recommend algebra for all because people learn and are ready at different levels. And it's why we see at the high school, it's awful having these terrible conversations of, do you drop out of honors? Do you retake that? How do you undo this? And that's not an easy process. So I just want to, I don't know if that advances anybody. I just want to name the system thing that we're doing and talking about here, and it's complex.
And I want to follow up on that real quick, though, because I fielded numerous phone calls frustrated with, a system of acceleration that essentially their language say requires students to get private tutors so that they can be successful, which happens in that integrated 3 and pre-calc spot because they had always been good at math, could calculate quickly, but never really develop the underlying foundational understanding that falls apart. And it's, how can you build a system in that essentially requires all the kids in the class, everyone has to get a private tutor. And there are a lot of math teachers who couldn't be happier about, taking $75 an hour, or $100 an hour on what people are charging for it. But if the system requires every student to get a private tutor.
Yeah. We have a question on the Tracy.
Sorry, I do.
It's very nice.
Okay, Tracy.
Thanks so much. So this is a good segue because you're talking about integrated and integrated 3, integrated 3H. I definitely understand the desire to integrate, scaffold some of the concepts behind creating integrated curriculum. We've heard, particularly at the high school level, some trends of more and more students, particularly as you get to integrated 3 honors, starting to struggle for some of the things that you've just mentioned. Could you talk about whether or not there are any efforts underway to revisit the integrated curriculum and identify what's working and what can be improved to make sure the students are really grasping the content?
Sure. I'm not necessarily sure that it's an integrated issue because in my, previous district and in talking to, the other supervisors who do what I do, honors algebra 2 is typically, a similar spot. I will say that there is, 2 or 3 years ago, a textbook was written by, Dr. Eric Malo and Steve Linewand. I'm trying to think of the name, called Invigorating High School Math Pathways. They're actually coming to the IU this spring. There are about 8 high school teachers and I are going out. That's just looking at other pathways, whether it's integrated or non-integrated, but really making sure that every student has a pathway where they can be successful in math and looking at really kind of, unique options that other school districts across the country have used. But it is, it gets a lot of juice, the idea of like, what's the appropriate pathway for all students? That I think we want to make sure that we consider, especially for students who are, who are struggling on the lower end and students who are being really, successful and maybe, bored in their classrooms, that really thinking about the pathways to what's next for them in their careers, I think is something that lots of math districts are kind of engaging instead of.
Thanks, Tracy. And there's one more in line.
Michelle?
Hi, sorry about that. I just had a question. So I know like I think the number that I'm gonna quote is wrong. I just tried to look at my email, I couldn't find it. I know for statistics, if you get if let's say you're in integrated math 2, and you get, I believe it's a 78 and below, I could be wrong, they're gonna recommend statistics. My concern is for the honors recommendation, the process is not clear for parents. So for example, a kid could have a 95 in a class and not be recommended for honors. And I just want to know why that pathway is not as clear as it is for if you get a 78, you go to statistics, but there's not a clear pathway for honors for the recommendation process.
It's a really great point. And I don't know that I've, explored and engaged with the high school administration and the high school departments to see if we have a clear blueprint or if that's going by. I'm assuming that there is something that guides them to make those decisions. I'm not sure exactly what those, rubrics or metrics are. I'm glad that you brought it up because I think it puts that on my radar for me to explore. But I will say again, these are recommendations based on the teacher or the school building's, historical experience. But it should be a family's choice what level they're taking a course ultimately.
Right. And so I just want to speak to that really quickly. So like, for example, if you have a student and, they're not 100% confident, but they think they can do something and a teacher says, we think you should be in CP, it's kind of difficult to convince a student that they can still do well. I think there should be a threshold and a metrics that is designed. If you say you get 77%, 78%, you go to statistics, I think there should be something for honors the same way. And right now there is not. I've asked around for a while, I've sent emails and I've asked for this specifically. So like if you have a kid that has a 96 and they're recommending CP, I want to see like, something more structured the same way we recommend statistics.
I think
If
that's
that
fair.
makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Am I good to go?
Yeah, go.
So I also have another son who's on the opposite side. IEP struggles with math, and last year Dr. Lilly was talking about the concept that I really loved, and I just was wondering if it's gonna stay is, he called it like the high ceiling, low floor, I think he said. So, my son has to, like, when he's doing long division right now, and, we have to use our fingers and count in some ways. He gets it right, but he has to drop it back to, very low level addition, and sometimes he has to mark it down and count and all those things. Is that still going to be like the process? Like, is he still gonna be able to use those things in class and still get
Such a really good question, a really kind of like an important one. That concept of low floor, high ceiling, kind of oftentimes you'll hear it kind of interchangeably with multiple entry points. That is a key component of grade level math. So that Scott mentioned that math is the only time we separate kids. You should be able to, no matter what level's in your class, right? Whether you take out the accelerated kids or they're in that that class. To provide instruction and interesting enough activities so that, no matter who is in front of you in the room, that everyone has a chance to move forward. That I think one of the things that unfortunately happens with instruction, probably specifically math, is you have kids here, here, and here, and we teach to here. These kids get it no matter what, because, those are those kids. Middle kids get it, and the low kids kind of like, they struggle and they need support. The idea of low floor, high ceiling, and multiple entry points is, can we take a problem and have an option for all kids to move forward? that's the instructional pedagogy piece that I, believe in and will work with teachers to do. The second piece, though, that you mentioned, where he's still doing long division, where he's able to do long division, but he's doing it at a less efficient strategy. The training that I just led with K-4 teachers in November was really on understanding, the development of numerical reasoning, which is the idea that we don't want teachers to get confused, that you can also often hide incorrect understanding behind correct answers. And that just because you can multiply and find out that 7 times 6 is 42, you may not actually be using multiplicative reasoning. Because if you're drawing 7 circles and putting 6 dots in each and then kind of 1, 2, 3, up to 42, you're using counting. If you're using skip counting, if you're going 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, 40, let's go too fast.
Yeah.
35, 42, you're using additive reasoning, you're skip counting. So really take, what I talk to the teachers about is don't be confused by correct answers, that it should be moving kids forward. So an example of your son that's doing division, but really using probably additive thinking, the goal of the teacher should be, how do I take them from where they are and not let them sit because they're getting a right answer? How do I move them towards multiplicative division?
Right, yeah.
How do they move towards multiplicative reasoning? So I'm going really fast, by the way.
What you just said, it's like math. It just, what you said just clicked. Like very important what you just said.
So we don't want to leave kids using inefficient strategies because they're getting a right answer.
Yeah.
Thanks for mentioning that. That was a great.
Yeah.
Please.
Thank you so much and welcome.
Thanks.
I don't know if this was covered. I apologize for coming in late, but I was just curious about how technology is used in the classroom, not used in the classroom, especially in the younger years, like.
Sure. So, and I referenced this kind of as we were talking about AI and Desmos at the middle school, is, technology should not be used to isolate children. That there are ways to integrate technology in our Desmos program. The middle school does a really great job of building community, and making a class feel cohesive as opposed to every student locked into their own computer. I think there are, good things for practice, whether that's Dreambox and IXL and other pathways for practice. But to me, learning is a social endeavor. Mathematics is a social endeavor. And that kids come to school, and I'll say these same 2 questions again. Kids come to school to learn who they are as a learner in relation to their peers, and to figure out, how is what I'm learning, how am I connected to to what I'm learning, or why am I learning this? And that only happens, socially.
Okay. So are there kind of parameters or especially for the younger grades in terms of how much screen time our kids are getting, or how's that playing out right now?
Sure. Again, this is probably a trust and verify thing where I haven't been able to get into as many classrooms as I would like right now to see it in practice. I will know that my 10 poll will always be, how are you, are you using it passively? Meaning, are they kind of taking in information, or are they doing things? And how is this, how are you connecting this back to the social component of school?
Yeah, I like that you're talking about.
I don't know the specific answer that you needed there, so I'm sorry about that.
Anything else on that?
No.
Are there any other questions in the room? Okay. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for being so generous with your answers and willing to answer every question.
And I know I can get a little wonkish, so I apologize if I went too deep in some of these pieces, but
Thank you.
I'm never gonna do it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, guys.